Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining me. Obviously, I'm nervous. First time doing it in Sika, so it's kind of big time. I just wanted to introduce myself first. My name is Spring Montez. I do mixed media kinetic installation, and I'm from California. So today I'm going to be discussing my experiences living part time in Egypt for 2 years and how it changed me as an artist and mostly as an individual. Thanks, anyways, Julia. No worries. Thank you very much.
I would like to introduce this brilliant woman. Spring, she's going to share her travels with you. And I can't wait. Thank you so much for coming.
No worries. All right. So when I graduated, I felt a lot like this. My education journey took me to 2 community colleges and 3 universities over 18 years. When I finally graduated at 36, I was a wife, mother, and I'd spent half my life in pursuit of a ceramics degree. I felt a profound sense of accomplishment, but also a unique sense of loss. The drive that had sustained me to finish my degree was gone. Graduating also meant I no longer had a studio to create in, studio mates to interact with, or deadlines to keep me motivated. With the structure and security of academic life gone, order gave way to the stress of a life I had been trying to avoid. My marriage was coming to a slow and ugly end. Living in a dysfunctional, abusive relationship for 15 years had taken its toll on my mental health, confidence, and identity. I felt like a broken woman. Graduating also coincided with the ending of a body of work I'd spent 3 years creating. Each wall piece took between 50 to 400 hours to make and was comprised of up to 6,000 individually rolled out, paper-thin, vitrified pieces of stained porcelain that were both kinetic and created sound. It was time-consuming and finicky work, to say the least, but I needed to create something that was so involved as a distraction from the difficulties of my marriage. I needed to have beauty in my life, even if I had to create it myself. Once I graduated, I didn't feel the need to carry it on. It had served its purpose, and for the time being, I was done with it. By the time I graduated, I had already been working in clay for almost 20 years, experimenting, exploring, following the meandering road of ceramics. But the turmoil of my life left me with a lack of inspiration and no reason to create. I felt I had nothing to say that was compelling enough to be said. So much had ended in a short period of time, and I was struggling to adjust. By the end of 2013, I was getting divorced and trying to get my life back together. I was rebuilding myself as an individual, as a woman, and as an artist. But I had no studio, no money, and no inspiration. What I lacked in economic resources, I made up for in the boundless optimism that can only be found after leaving a toxic relationship. Within the span of 10 years, my ex-husband went back to Egypt 8 times with the justification that his family and country were so important that he couldn't miss them. By the end of our marriage, I had a love-hate relationship with Egypt. As a lover of history and culture, it fascinated me. But in my eyes, Egypt was the other woman. Our cultural differences and how they impacted our marriage left me with more questions than answers. Eventually, curiosity got the better of me, and I decided it was high time I took myself. Around this time, I was also feeling the buildup of 36 years of racial and socioeconomic prejudice. I've lived in California my whole life. And it has, although it's considered liberal, it has its fair share of prejudice and racism. I longed to be in a place where I wasn't the other. where being brown was the norm. I wanted to be in a country where I wasn't followed upon entering the store, questioned if I am a real American, as if birthright wasn't enough, spoken to very loudly and slowly, as if I couldn't understand what they were saying. I wanted to be somewhere where my Latin heritage wasn't equated with less than. I needed change, and I felt Egypt was the place to give it to me. So I decided, I wanted to go to Egypt to make lovely things, but I needed a place to work. I didn't know anyone there, and I didn't speak Arabic. I figured I could fix two of the three, so I started researching residencies, but the results weren't good. I used social media to research universities with a ceramics program, found teachers on Facebook, and played detective to find their students, which led to other ceramic artists and art centers. I learned the hard fact of how vastly different Egypt is compared to the US. I couldn't find a single residency in the country. If I wanted to take a class, I needed to either be accepted to a university or to some type of long-term program. To make matters worse, Egypt is an earthenware-only country. Not that that's bad to anybody doing earthenware, but my world was porcelain and color and cone 10. I figured I could give it a shot and make it work. But another friend told me that there was no ready-made anything. Clays, glazes, underglazes, everything is made from scratch. And that's where I had a lot of difficulty. To experiment with a new clay body and firing range would be one thing, but to test out new recipes for everything seemed a level of experimentation that could not yield anything close to any kind of success in the span of a month or two. I reconsidered working in porcelain, but the only space that does that are international porcelain manufacturers. So I thought about proposing a Kohler-esque residency, but woman working in an all-male factory was never going to work. So I wanted to work at a friend's studio, but even with a place to work, I didn't want to devote endless time to experimenting, and I had to give up on the idea of clay. But instead, I focused on my past work and new materials to work with. I traveled to Egypt for the first time in January of 2015. It was my first time leaving the US. And in the next 2 years, I took 3 more trips. My trips in winter lasted a month, and I'd return for the whole summer. And 90% of the images are all mine from all the different times. Cairo was overwhelming. Greater Cairo has a population of almost 20 million and 234 square miles. It's noisy, bustling, dirty, and amazing. Of course, when you think of Egypt, you think ancient Egypt and history. In fact, you can't go far and not encounter history, whether it's something a few hundred years old or several thousand. And these are some of the places I went to. Although Cairo is not as green a city as you find in the US, it has lovely parks. And Egypt itself has remarkable natural beauty, including mountains, coral reefs, desert oases, and picturesque beaches on the Red Sea and the Mediterranean. Having majored in archaeology as well as ceramics, I was like a kid in a candy store when it came to museums, and it's kind of surreal to see stuff you've seen your whole life in books. The more I experienced Cairo, the more I saw pattern everywhere. And of all of the mundane things to decorate, I noticed the sidewalks. It seemed everywhere we went, there was a different pattern on the sidewalk. Some simple, some not so simple. I was struck with the simplicity of the approach. Adding what I considered beauty to the area just below my feet seemed brilliant. The more I encountered new patterns, the more it made me think how opportunities for art can be in unexpected places. And it made me think about what opportunities I could be squandering. It forced me to start thinking outside the box and beyond the blank white wall. These are some bags of nuts that I actually found at the grocery store, and I wanted to buy all the bags just because I wanted to buy all of them just because I wanted the bag so much. This is stalls at Hanal Halili, which is a souk or medieval style market, which is housed in a building that is from 970 AD. It's alabaster and pierced metal. And seeing all that Islamic geometry everywhere just made me want to incorporate it on the surface of pots and mugs when I got back home. Inspiration also abounds in the architectural accents of windows, doors, arches, and entryways. The complexity of pattern, artisanship, and the conscious decision prioritizing beauty and history over cost and time impressed me and was a constant reminder that I wasn't home. So from left to right, apartment entryway doors, ceramic studio doors, mosque door, fort door, church door, back door in a kiln room, doors in an apartment I stayed at, janky old doors at a dilapidated building, doors in the shop of a mall, and a handcrafted screen door with my then boyfriend, now husband, standing by it. This is a really large doorway at Ramses Station, which is like the Grand Central Station of Cairo. And yeah, arches and really cute doorways. Cairo is comprised of many neighborhoods, some dating back over 1,000 years and others newly built, each with its own architectural flavor referencing the time it was built. And it was all eye candy for me. There's a lot of public mosaic art as well. The image on the bottom right-hand corner is absolutely massive. It's more than 2 stories high and more than 40 feet long. This is at my friend's job at an art center. Of all the experiences I had with art, street art had the most profound effect on me. I remember first coming across it at night, and I was taken aback. I didn't expect it, the power of it, the sense of familiar beauty. Having lived in Oakland, California for almost 20 years, graffiti and street art are everywhere. What some consider a blight on society, I look at as beautiful, raw, deeply individual community art. I've always been inspired by its power, anti-establishment stance, unique visual vocabulary, and activist themes. It is synonymous with the marginalized and an amplifier of voice. The street art in Cairo struck me with its unique contemporary Egyptian voice. Referencing images of a gilded past juxtaposed with contemporary issues in modern Egypt, it offered a visual vocabulary I could appreciate, but with modern cultural references I couldn't understand. It was a reminder of the universal power of art, its ability to reinforce identity, to empower and deconstruct. These works were larger than life, bold and unabashed. It was visual crack for me, and I was inspired, enthralled, and I wanted more. While in Egypt, I had the pleasure of visiting professional ceramic artists, their studios, art centers, and small pottery factories. In Old Cairo, the Fustat Center is a government-funded art center whose mission it is to preserve the teachings of traditional crafts in Egypt. Located in the oldest part of Cairo, the center stands and is named after the first capital of Egyptian Muslim rule. I was told that the area has been a center for ceramic production for over 1,000 years. Besides the main buildings, there are also workshops for wood, plaster carving, and textiles. And here are some examples of the work in the gallery. Old Cairo is also home to both small production factories and contemporary studios. Not far from Fustat is a collection of about 12 independent small pottery manufacturers, each specializing in everyday wear. We arrived on a day that many kilns were being fired. You can see the smoke in the air. As I was taking pictures, some of the men got up and asked that I stop, fearful that I was a government official. I assured them that I wasn't. I was just a happy potter admiring their studios. Eventually, they believed me, and we discussed the government, pots, techniques over tea. And this is a guy who makes about 800 of these hookah things a day, and they're shipped all over the Middle East and the world. This is an area that's also in Old Cairo, which is a loose collective of different studios. There's sculptors, metal workers, jewelers, and there's an art and cultural center that's has galleries, and they put on music shows and stuff like that. And in the picture, the gentleman is my friend Hytham, who is in charge of the ceramics at Fustat Center. So I was fortunate enough to meet a lot of ceramic artists, and this is the work of my friend's dad's father's company. He started it 40 years ago in in Cairo, in like this swanky neighborhood. It looks like it's been there 1,000 years and not 40 because they have so much stuff in there. But it was really, really cool to see their production techniques and pretty much how they do everything. And that's my friend Mohammed in the bottom. What is that? Yeah. So life in Cairo is both fast and slow, chaotic yet ordered, complex yet simple. For all 4 trips, I stayed in a neighborhood at the edge of Cairo called Nasser City. I always stayed in the same apartment building, and over time, it became my home. I got to know many of the local store owners and their employees, and with the exception of crossing the street, which is the scariest thing, and I never got used to, daily life for me was surprisingly easy to adjust to. Almost everything I needed was within a 5-minute walk. There are literally thousands of convenience stores that stay open 24/7, and all types of little stands everywhere that, from my perspective, sold the most random stuff. Loofah, sweet potato that's roasted, cactus fruit, and there's like a pottery cart that was in Alexandria. Every day I indulged in the fresh juices that they offered, fresh OJ, pomegranate juice, coconut milk, and it was usually between 15 and 40 cents. Sometimes they made it in front of you. I was amazed by the fact that with a population of 20 million, they still have a farm-to-table living. And it was something that I would love to be able to afford but can't. And I was amazed that they could actually do it with so many people. I couldn't believe that you can have anything delivered to your doorstep, including McDonald's breakfast when I had a hankering for home, and some medications from the pharmacy. So these are some examples of experiments I did with my own work. Unfortunately, you can't hear it, but they like tinkle. Oh, there he goes. As much as I wanted it to, it didn't work. So I decided to experiment with other materials. And this is a list of some of them I worked with. And because of this time, I have researched and gone into LEDs, fiber optic wire, solar panels, and electromagnetism. So whenever I told anybody I was going to Egypt, the first thing I would usually hear is, "Oh, that's cool." And then the second thing was, "But is it safe?" I took this to mean 2 things. Is it safe as a woman, and is it safe as an American? Popular culture and Islamophobia have done a wonderful job at misrepresenting the realities of both. The words safe American and Muslim country seem to be at odds with many people, and I am here to say that nothing could be further from the truth. No one tried to put a burqa on me, and no one was jealous of my freedom. The truth is, Egyptians were welcoming, accepting, and happy to meet me. Never once did anyone say anything bad about the US to me. Something very unexpected also happened. I had never felt safer, more empowered, or more privileged in my life. My American passport afforded me a freedom that I can only compare to white privilege. Being American meant that the societal rules imposed on Egyptian women didn't apply to me, that I was better protected. It meant that people were nicer, more accommodating, more welcoming. Doubt was replaced with trust, indifference replaced with smiles. If I spoke, people listened. People didn't question my ability to pay for items, much less think I would steal them. Coming back to the US was always a sobering reminder of my position as less than minority, but it also helped for me to see things in another perspective. So the nature of long-term travel is vastly different than being a tourist in a charter group for 7 days. And here are some things that I learned. When you're in an emergency, the last thing you want to figure out is how the healthcare system operates. Just a basic understanding can help save time and frustration. I took my son on my last trip. He developed pain that left him unable to walk and even stand, and as a mother, I was distraught. In moments like this, you realize just how far away you are from the comfort of the familiar. I thank God I had my boyfriend who researched doctors, hospitals, and negotiated the cost. Some people adapt to different cuisine, others do not. I love salami, and on a particular trip, I was craving it for weeks. My pilgrimage for pork took me to Madi, a neighborhood on the other side of Cairo. It took the better part of a long, hot summer day. Long story short, if you love it, bring it with you. I learned to take a suitcase full of food every single time. My boyfriend and I took many trips. I researched packages on Egyptian websites in English. He researched the same websites in Arabic. Those prices were a third of the price. Locals get the best deals for sure. And I had the hard realization that there aren't really art stores in Egypt. They call them stationery stores, and they really don't have the selection and the quality that you find here in the States. So I had to make sure that I planned ahead and bought everything that I thought I would need so that I could take it with me. So all good things must come to an end, and I was going back and forth 4 times. When I returned home, to my home in Oakland, California, it was always bittersweet, but it became increasingly difficult. I had to come back because I needed to make money and I needed to see my son, but the lines between home and vacation became blurred, and eventually Egypt felt like home. Every time I came back, I worked 3 different types of jobs in 3 different cities. Weekdays, I worked in the mornings as a substitute teacher in Oakland. Weeknights, I worked in San Francisco as a trainer for a coffee chain. Weekends, I worked as a soccer analyst in Emeryville. The constant rotation between these jobs in Egypt made me feel like I was living between 4 worlds. Over time, I became acutely aware of the stark contrast between rich and poor. We all know that the lives of the rich are vastly different than that of the poor, but it carries more weight. It becomes very real when we experience it firsthand every day. In San Francisco, I served people who owned multi-million-dollar homes. In Oakland, my bus ride every morning took me past 6 homeless tent cities. In Egypt, the difference was just as dramatic. I saw people who lived in mansions with a value of roughly $350,000 in a country where the average monthly salary was $170 a month, and some people live on less than $1.50 a day. When the back and forth to Egypt ended, I finally had time to think and process. I thought of the street art in Egypt and how art can empower. I thought of the patterns on the sidewalks, how there is potential for expression in the most unlikely of places. I thought about the thousands of kids I had met whose stories of poverty were so similar to my own. I realized if I am to make anything, then it must start with the community it serves. My focus now is to create community-based installations that bridges the gap between access and art in low-income communities. That's actually a picture of me in 2 different classes that I had reoccurring jobs with over 3 years, and I kind of fell in love with all those kids. So what I learned from 2 years of travel has fundamentally changed my life and work, and here are just a few. There is as much power in I will as I can't. When I used to hear people talk about traveling to far-off countries, I thought to myself that it was just for the rich. I never felt that someone who was poor could do it. In 2 years, I went to the Netherlands, Italy, and Egypt 4 times. And I'd rather regret a mistake than a missed opportunity. The first time I went to Egypt, I was really, really, really scared. But I knew if I didn't go, I would regret it. And my life is infinitely better because of it. When I give myself no excuses, I deny myself failure. For me to be able to afford going to Egypt, there had to be a plan A and only plan A. Willpower and singular focus working together can produce amazing results. If I never entertained the idea of allowing myself excuses, I would never need that. When I was in Egypt, I tried to squeeze more seconds out of a minute in order to squeeze more days out of a month. And when I was back, time dragged at a glacial speed, and I felt like I would die before the end of the day. I knew I would drive myself crazy thinking about time. The only way I could give myself peace was to be present in the now. The only limitations I have are ones I give myself. I experienced a mind shift after Egypt that allowed me to challenge my phobia of driving. Last year, I finally got my driver's license. And everyone wants and needs love and beauty in their life. To remind ourselves of this basic need is to remind ourselves of our common humanity. My time in Egypt taught me, challenged me, expanded my perspective, gave me new appreciation for my life and where I live. It gave me adventure, love, new friends, and changed my life. What started off as curiosity and search for answers led to personal growth, empowerment, and finding my voice again. If art is an expression of oneself, then when you change, your art must follow suit. Thank you. So this is totally random, but I have 2 buddies. One's a sponge, the other's a needle tool, and they go on adventures. And does anyone have any questions? Any questions? No? Yes. So I funded myself through working my butt off. I work 60 hours a week, 30 days straight. I developed a system where every time I did a full day's work, I filled it in, and my goal was to see every single full thing filled in as much as possible. And I developed a budget for myself where I tracked every single penny I spent, because I would translate everything in Egyptian pounds, and I would say, do I want this dollar or do I want 8 Egyptian pounds? And I wanted 8 Egyptian pounds. Anything else? Yes. So this is something that I'm sure most people would never expect. English is taught starting at elementary school. So pretty much everyone either speaks English, really rough English, or you can find someone else who does. So yeah, it wasn't really that hard. Last one. So that was why I used social media to cultivate relationships prior to, because, you know, when you're from that area, you're going to know exactly what's going on, what's happening, what's not, where to stay, what's not. But also to, I originally wanted to stay there for a year and take my son with me. I was going to start an app in Egypt. So I was looking for a software engineer. I posted something on Freelancer. The person who seemed to be the best fit helped me a lot. We started going out. We got married. And I think if there's any other questions, I'd have to take it outside because we're done. Thank you so much.